Creepy, abandoned, building horror stories. The moon hung low over the horizon, casting long ghostly shadows through the narrow alleys of the town of Hollowbrook. The town was once a thriving industrial hub, but now it was a forgotten relic, marked by crumbling buildings, overgrown streets, and an eerie silence that settled in after sunset. And of all the forsaken structures, none was more notorious than the Hollowbrook Asylum. The asylum had stood abandoned for over 50 years. It was a sprawling, decaying labyrinth of halls and rooms where the mentally ill were once housed in harsh and inhumane conditions. Whispers of abuse, mysterious deaths, and even experiments on the patients had haunted its history. Locals swore they could still hear the anguished cries of its former inhabitants echoing through the building on windless nights. For years, no one dared go near it, except for the occasional group of thrill-seeking teenagers or urban explorers. Most came back with shaky footage, eerie photographs, and wild stories of disembodied voices or strange shadows. Some never returned at all. It was this morbid curiosity that led 5 friends, Evan, Lucy, Derek, Maria, and Nate, to plan their own adventure into the asylum. They weren't just any group of friends. They had grown up together, bonded by their love of horror films and creepy urban legends. On a particularly dull October evening, after one too many beers, they made a pact to visit the asylum on Halloween night. It would be the ultimate thrill, a real-life horror experience. The night of the visit came quickly. Hollowbrook was wrapped in fog, thick and heavy, as if the town itself was trying to swallow the asylum whole. The group arrived at the gate just before midnight. The iron bars were rusted but still formidable. However, Derek had come prepared with bolt cutters. With a few strong cuts, they pushed the gate open, its creak echoing like a warning. The asylum loomed before them, its brick walls streaked with grime, the windows shattered, and ivy creeping up the sides like skeletal fingers clawing at the sky. Lucy shuddered involuntarily, but she laughed it off. "It's just a building," she muttered. "Nothing more." They stepped inside the main entrance, the air immediately colder than it had been outside. Their footsteps echoed unnaturally loud in the vast empty foyer. The ceiling had collapsed in places, leaving gaping holes that revealed a sky tinged with an ominous shade of gray. The walls were stained with graffiti, some of it cryptic, others taunting. One phrase was scrawled in red near the entrance: "You're not alone." "People love to mess with you in places like this," Nate said, trying to lighten the mood, though his voice wavered slightly. They pressed deeper into the asylum, their flashlights sweeping over the decay, rotting furniture, crumbling walls, and a thick layer of dust that seemed to mute even their whispers. The first few rooms were uneventful, just empty shells that had once been offices or patient quarters. But as they ventured further, strange things started happening. First, it was the sounds. Evan swore he heard footsteps behind them, but when they turned, no one was there. Then, in the distance, there was the faint sound of laughter, high-pitched and almost childlike. Maria gripped Derek's arm. "You heard that, right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Derek nodded, but he tried to play it cool. "Probably just an echo or the wind." But the wind didn't laugh. They reached the second floor where the patient wards were located. The air here was thicker, stale, and suffocating. The walls were lined with rusted bed frames, their mattresses long gone, leaving only the springs behind. Some of the beds were overturned, and others looked as though they had been left hastily, as if their occupants had vanished mid-treatment. "Let's split up," Lucy suggested. "We'll cover more ground that way." "Terrible idea," Nate immediately protested. "Have you ever watched a horror movie?" But Lucy insisted, and after some grumbling, the group reluctantly agreed. Evan and Maria took the west wing, while Derek, Lucy, and Nate headed east. As Evan and Maria wandered through the maze of narrow corridors, they came across what appeared to be an old treatment room. Rusted medical equipment littered the floor, and in one corner was a large metal chair with leather straps, once used to restrain patients. As they approached, Maria suddenly gasped. There was a dark, wet spot on the chair's seat, fresh and glistening in the beam of their flashlight. Is that blood? She asked, her voice shaking. Evan knelt down to inspect it. His fingers hovered above the spot, but before he could touch it, the lights flickered and went out. Total darkness enveloped them. Evan? Maria's voice was panicked now. I'm here, he said, reaching for her hand. Just give me a second to fix this stupid flashlight. But before he could switch it back on, a low, guttural whisper came from behind them. Get out! They spun around, but there was nothing there. The air was still heavy with silence, and yet the whisper had been so close, as if someone had been standing right behind them. The flashlight flickered back to life, and Evan wasted no time. We need to find the others. Now. Meanwhile, Derek, Lucy, and Nate had found what appeared to be an old recreational room. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and a single faded photograph of a smiling doctor hung crookedly near the door. In the middle of the room stood an upright piano, untouched by the years of decay that had ravaged the rest of the asylum. Its keys were pristine, and its wood gleamed in the dim light. That's creepy, Derek said, inching closer to it. Nate, always the skeptic, rolled his eyes. It's just a piano, man. Lucy, ever the curious one, reached out and pressed one of the keys. A deep, resonant note echoed through the room, sending chills down all their spines. But before they could comment, the piano began playing by itself, a haunting melody filling the room. They backed away, eyes wide with fear. What the hell? Nate stammered. Who's doing that? No one answered. The music grew louder, faster, a discordant jumble of notes that set their teeth on edge. Then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. The silence that followed was suffocating. Lucy grabbed Derek's arm. We need to leave, she whispered. Back in the West Wing, Evan and Maria had almost made it back to the main hall when they saw something that stopped them in their tracks. Down the corridor, standing just outside the door they had come through, was a figure, a tall, shadowy silhouette that seemed to shimmer in the darkness. Do you see that? Maria whispered, her voice trembling. Evan nodded, unable to speak. The figure didn't move, but it felt like it was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Slowly they backed away, but as they turned to flee, they were met with a chilling sight. Another figure stood behind them. This one was different. Its face was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were wide, hollow pits of darkness. It was close enough to touch. Maria screamed, and the figure opened its mouth, revealing a gaping maw of blackness. They ran. The group collided in the main hall, breathless and terrified. No one said a word as they sprinted out of the asylum, the cold night air hitting their faces like a slap. Only when they reached the car did they stop to catch their breath. What the hell was that? Lucy gasped. No one had an answer. They piled into the car, speeding away from the asylum, leaving it behind in the fog. But as they drove away, none of them noticed the pale face watching them from one of the second-floor windows, its hollow eyes fixed on their retreating figures. They had made it out, but Hollowbrook Asylum was not done with them. It never was.